Last summer, you voted to save some of Britain's most endangered buildings. And for the winner, the restoration has already started. But what does the future hold for the others? Restoration. What happened next? Friday the 2nd of January on BBC Two.
Enjoy the BBC's 5 new stations and others when you buy a DAB digital radio. To find out more, visit our website.
The news on BBC One now with Darren Jordan. It's 10 o'clock.
America says it's facing its biggest terror threat since September the 11th. Security services say attacks are being planned on the scale of the World Trade Center. The Archbishop of Canterbury criticizes the way foreign terror suspects are held without trial. 7 days after Saddam's capture, relatives still searching for the truth about his victims. And number 1 for Christmas, Manchester United beat Tottenham to top the Premiership. Good evening. America has issued a stern warning about the danger of terrorist attacks on its soil during the Christmas holiday. The US head of Homeland Security, Tom Ridge, said the volume of intelligence from credible sources indicated the threat was now at its gravest since the September the 11th attacks of 2 years ago. The country has been put on an immediate orange terror alert. That's the second highest level.
Vigilance at the White House amid fears Al-Qaeda is trying to find holes in America's security. Officials believe terrorist attacks are possible over the Christmas holidays. Both the volume and credibility of recent intelligence reports prompted this somber new warning.
The strategic indicators, including Al-Qaeda's continued desire to carry out attacks against our homeland, are perhaps greater now than at any point since September 11th, 2001.
And as on that fateful day, aeroplanes are once again thought to be the main threat. Already tight, security at the nation's airports will now be increased.
The information we have indicates that extremists abroad are anticipating near-term attacks that they believe will either rival or exceed the attacks that occurred in New York and the Pentagon and the fields of Pennsylvania nearly 2 years ago.
The White House has always maintained that it does anticipate another major attack on US soil. But each time authorities raise the threat level, they're criticized for causing more panic than reassurance. Today, they clearly felt that was a risk worth taking. This is the 5th time since September the 11th that the threat level has been raised this high. But Americans have been told not to change their holiday arrangements. The government says it has a specific security plan, but it won't reveal the details. Catty Kay, BBC News, Washington.
Well, I'm joined from Washington by Tom Carvan, from Scotland Yard by Margaret Gilmore. Tom, first to you in Washington, what sort of intelligence has prompted this alert from the Americans?
Well, it seems there's no single piece of intelligence, as is often the case, but a combination of clues that has made people nervous, including constant references, according to Tom Ridge, among Al-Qaeda operatives to the desire of using a plane as a weapon. US intelligence sources here are saying the most likely outcome is probably an attack on US interests in Iraq or Saudi Arabia, but as everyone knows, Al-Qaeda would dearly love to land another attack on the American mainland.
And Tom, what measures are we likely to see in response to this threat?
Well, the main purpose of raising this really is to catch people's attention. As Americans start heading out to the airports over the holiday weekends, they want to tell people to be vigilant, because perhaps the best, really the only opportunity they're going to have of stopping these attacks is by someone seeing something suspicious. And so I think that they really would rather be accused of crying wolf than fail to issue a warning and have an attack occur.
All right, Tom, let's talk to Margaret Gilmore, who's there at Scotland Yard. Margaret, in terms of the situation here, are we facing a heightened threat as well?
Darren, what's happening is that the Americans are doing what Britain did 4 weeks ago. Then we had new intelligence suggesting that British interests here and abroad were under renewed threat, and we went up to the second highest level of alert. The Americans stayed on the third highest level of alert. They now have new intelligence today, therefore they have come up to the same level as us, that second highest level of alert. Now, my understanding is that they are talking about intelligence which is very America-specific. They're talking about American planes and American travellers, not British planes or British travellers. Having said that, we are also reminded that we here in Britain are still on the highest level of alert that we've been on since September the 11th. There are more officers who are armed and out on the streets of the UK fighting in this war against terror. And we are also warned that there are more travellers around at the moment with the holiday season. There will be a great deal of relief at the very highest level here at Scotland Yard once the holiday period is over. Anyone travelling tomorrow can expect long delays and massive security.
All right, Margaret Gilmore at Scotland Yard, Tom Carver in Washington. Thank you both. The Home Secretary, David Blunkett, has defended Britain's right to detain foreign terrorist suspects without trial. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, is the latest public figure to criticise the government. He says the policy risks alienating moderate Muslims.
Dr. Williams has made improving relations with Islam a priority during his first year as leader of the worldwide Anglican Church. He was one of the most vehement critics of the war in Iraq. Dr. Williams opposes the detention without trial of Muslim foreign nationals suspected of terrorist offences, 14 of whom are at Belmarsh Jail in London. In a newspaper interview, Dr. Williams said, if we want to persuade moderate Muslims to sign up to toleration and pluralism of the right kind, anything that gives the impression that we're targeting Muslims is problematic. We have a lot of ground to make up.
Right, good morning.
Last week, a committee of senior politicians said the detention of foreign nationals should be brought to an urgent end because it risked miscarriages of justice. The government says the law was introduced as an emergency anti-terrorism measure after the September the 11th attacks and that security remains paramount. But British Muslims say they feel alienated by a law that seems to be aimed at them.
The Muslim community feels that they are under siege. They believe that they are being targeted by the government. They believe that these are just fishing expeditions.
In the past week, Rowan Williams has held discussions here at Lambeth Palace with the Iranian ambassador and representatives of the Iraqi Governing Council. But now he fears efforts by moderates to build democracy and religious tolerance in Muslim countries are being steadily undermined. The Home Secretary said today that those at Belmarsh remained free to leave the UK. He denied Muslims were being targeted.
I'm not interested in the religious commitment or the religious background of the individuals concerned. I'm interested in whether they're terrorists. So we're not holding people in Belmarsh because they're Islam. We're holding them because they pose a major threat here and across the world.
But Dr. Williams won't let the issue drop. He's expected to return to it in his Christmas sermon. Robert Piggott, BBC News.
Relatives of the victims of the Lockerbie bombing have urged Britain and America not to forget the tragedy while they build a new relationship with Libya. It's 15 years to the day since the attack on Pan Am Flight 103, which killed 270 people. A Libyan agent was jailed for life for the bombing, but the families say an independent inquiry is needed.
The memorial at Lockerbie to those who died here 15 years ago today. The names of 270 people murdered. A day of horror that will never be forgotten in this community. Pan Am Flight 103 was blown up over the Scottish town on its way from London to New York. Everyone on board died. 11 people were killed on the ground too. And to this day, their families don't know exactly who planned the attack and why. Libya did finally accept responsibility earlier this year, a major step towards its international rehabilitation. And in 2001, a Libyan intelligence agent, Abdelbasset al-Megrahi, was jailed for life for his involvement. So now relatives like Pamela Dix, who lost her brother Peter at Lockerbie, want the Libyan leader to say what else he knows.
If Colonel Gaddafi could actually come up with real answers to the questions that we have and others will have, then we may finally be able to find out whether the new openness from Libya is something real and not simply theoretical.
The focus is, of course, on Colonel Gaddafi's pledge to get rid of weapons of mass destruction. Today, Libya offered to allow unannounced inspections of its nuclear facilities. But along with that, more openness about Lockerbie remains a serious test of Gaddafi's true intentions.
He wants clearly to be part of the civilized world. This is something which would certainly help his reputation if he were to initiate some clearing up of this matter and shed some light on it.
Relatives have also renewed their calls for the government here to set up an independent inquiry into Lockerbie, but that looks unlikely. The Foreign Office says it doesn't think that would deliver anything new or useful. Daniel Bircher, BBC News.
Virgin Atlantic has apologised to passengers left stranded in Washington after its pilot was arrested. Captain Richard Harwell will appear in court tomorrow, charged with trying to fly a plane under the influence of alcohol. Earlier, nearly 400 passengers arrived at Heathrow 26 hours later than planned. It's feared that massive mudslides could have killed up to 200 people in the Philippines. Heavy rain and illegal logging have been blamed for the tragedy. Bad weather and blocked roads have hampered rescue efforts. A British man held captive in Colombia for more than 3 months could be freed tomorrow. It's reported that the rebel group holding Mark Henderson and 4 Israeli tourists are taking them to a remote release point. 1 week after the capture of Saddam Hussein, there are growing calls for justice from the families of his victims. Meanwhile, the Iraqi Governing Council has proposed a South African-style Truth and Reconciliation Commission to begin healing the wounds of the country's recent past. From Baghdad, Ola Girin reports.
Iraq's dead have no voices now, but here are their faces, displayed outside this prisoners' association, lest anyone forget. Inside, their relatives looking for answers, hoping for justice now Saddam's a prisoner himself. Sajah wants revenge for her husband, Rati, and 12 relatives, all killed for fighting against the regime. I want Saddam sent to every house in Iraq where he had a son murdered, she says, so people can spit in his face. But the dictator is headed for the dock, and downstairs in the chaos of the basement, we found the raw material for a trial. If you want to make a case against Saddam Hussein, you can start right here. These files contain names, dates and places, information about where people were taken and when their deaths were discovered. And this isn't the complete record of Iraq's tragedies. There may be many more victims than those listed here. These files, testimony to an ugly truth. Saddam didn't work alone. He had many helpers, some willing, some reluctant. One leading politician here telling us victims and oppressors should confront one another in public, as they've done in South Africa.
I would love to see that happening on the television, on the radios, on all the public sort of media, if you like. This is part of the healing process, a general healing process in Iraq, and I think we need to start this process immediately.
But some here prefer to look forward, not back. Among Sunday afternoon footballers in Baghdad, we found hardship but fresh hope. I wanted to emigrate, says Karak. Now I'll stay. I want things to be better. But the future will depend on facing the past, what Saddam did to Iraqis and what they did to one another. Orla Girin, BBC News, Baghdad.
Now with news of a successful day for Manchester United, but of spectacular failure for England's cricketers, here's Rob on it. Rob.
Thanks, Dan, and good evening to you. Well, United manager Sir Alex Ferguson said he'd pick band defender Rio Ferdinand for the match at Tottenham today, and after some late deliberation he did. A decision he'll feel was vindicated by his side's 2-1 win. And so United will be top of the Premiership this Christmas, just 1 point clear of Arsenal and Chelsea, but 14 clear of Southampton, who beat Portsmouth 3-0 today.
Take a long look. Appeal pending. Rio Ferdinand playing football may soon be a rarity. United decided he was mentally fit at White Hart Lane. He almost snatched the first goal, but John O'Shea beat him to it. United up inside 15 minutes. The lead doubled by half-time from the predictable source. Van Nistelrooy's shot helpfully deflected. Spurs apparently completely deflated. But the home team found new vigour in the second half. Dalma's cool cross was met by Poyet, and a goal back was the least Tottenham deserved. Ferdinand endured a few anxious moments but reminded United why they'll miss him. Down on the south coast, Southampton have the right to boast. A comical first goal in the derby, followed by second-half domination as Marin Pajas signalled he's probably over a miserable year of injury. Southampton's hard work, epitomised in their third goal, has taken them into European contention. Their neighbours are living in a different world. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
Celtic are 8 points clear again at the top of the Scottish Premier League after a 2-0 win at Motherwell. Their first goal came after just 3 minutes. John Hartson latching onto Chris Sutton's cross. And in a game that went entirely Celtic's way, Motherwell missed a penalty before Celtic's second, Alan Thompson, with a perfectly executed free kick. And in the day's other game, Dunfermline beat Hibernian 2-1. Well, after 2 stubborn draws, England's cricketers finally capitulated to Sri Lanka in the third test in Colombo. Their second innings total of 148 left them beaten by an innings and 215 runs, the third heaviest defeat ever inflicted on an English test side. Man of the series, Muttiah Muralitharan, took 4 wickets to take his 3-match total to 26.
This was the moment that captain Michael Vaughan discovered what it was like to lose a test series, England's biggest defeat to Sri Lanka. It was the climax of a dismal day for the tourists. They needed 363 just to avoid an innings defeat, but the scene was set when Marcus Trescothick